Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 27 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
Mark Bishop.
And we are, of course, reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book about world mythologies from around the world. We are still focusing on Native American myths and legends. That gets you every single time. Every single time I say that, I see you laugh.
Well, it's funny.
Oh, well, thank you. And this time we are covering The Sun Ensnared and Other Legends, which is just kind of a collection of various Native American myths. No specific region. Some of the stories it gives the tribe or the region that these are from. Some of them Jake Jackson does not. So it's kind of just, these are just typical stories is kind of what he was trying to present, just to get a feel of the general sort of vibe of the Native American myths and legends was kind of what I got from his introduction.
I found them quite tedious.
Really?
Yes.
That surprises me. You never find anything tedious, especially when it's 20 pages long and you have to read it for the podcast.
Sarcasm. There's a lot of extra twists and turns in the stories that didn't seem to make any sense or have any reason to be in the story.
Yeah, there were some interesting plot details in here. I guess we should...
A lot of animal transformations and transfigurations.
True. Very true.
Quite stupid.
I guess we should go ahead and get into the first story, which is The Sun Ensnared.
Wait.
Okay, I'm waiting.
I want to. I don't really want to go on a rant.
Oh no.
I do want to mention in this introduction to this section of the Native American stories, Jake Jackson mentions how these stories illustrate their popular superstitions and that they're industrious people who, quote, lived happily as caretakers of the earth, promoting the unity and the continuity of all life. I don't know that that's an accurate statement of the illiterate nomads.
Oh boy.
Who many points in their history murdered each other.
Yes.
And stole, women and children from each other and did all sorts of bad things. But if evidently Mr. Jackson has his own mythology of what Native Americans were. So I just wanted to point that out.
That is fantastic. Thank you for that.
There were a lot of fine and industrious people among the group of them, but they were not all fine. They were not all industrious, And one of these stories was kind of racist, but we'll get to that.
I actually do have some thoughts on that one, but that is further down the line here. The first story is that of The Sun Ensnared. At the beginning of time, there lived only two humans, a young brother and sister, and the sister took on the responsibility of caring for the both of them, as her brother had never grown beyond the size of an infant. Many years passed, and the sister one day gave her brother a bow and arrow, instructing him to try and shoot a snowbird while she left to gather wood. The boy attempted to shoot the bird, but he unfortunately missed, but his sister kept encouraging him. Then the next day, he hit a large snowbird, then asking his sister to dry its skin in the sun so he could make a coat out of it, and then they could cook the meat. With each passing day, the boy grew more confident in his hunting abilities, and soon he had killed 10 snowbirds whose skins were made into a great coat he wore always. One day the boy asked his sister if there were any other people out in the world, but she only replied that if there were, they would be terrible beings. But this only piqued the boy's curiosity, and so he set out into the wilderness. By midday he had walked a great distance and lay down in the sun to rest, but when he awoke he realized that his coat had been singed in the sun and had shrunk around his body. Furious at the sun, he returned to his sister, where he fell into a great depression and hardly moved for 20 days. At last he got up, demanding that his sister find him materials to make a noose to catch the sun with, and she first offered dried deer sinew and snowbird skins, but he turned those down, and so she offered her hair, which he graciously used to make the snare. He then laid the noose in a spot where he knew the sun would rise, and when it did, it was restrained by the rope, and so the world was plunged into a deep shadow. Fear and panic erupted among the animals until the dormouse, who was then larger than a mountain, volunteered to free the sun. She approached the cord, and as she gnawed at it, her enormous bulk was turned to ashes by the heat. When the sun was finally freed, she was now one of the tiniest creatures, known as Kugebingwaka, or blind woman. I'm going to read here from the book. As soon as he discovered that the sun is a...
No, don't read from the book. You want to read from the book?
Oh, yes.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. What was the point of that? As soon as he discovered that the sun had escaped his snare, the little brother returned home once more to his sister. But he was now no longer anxious to take revenge, since his adventure had brought him greater wisdom in the knowledge that he had not been born to interfere with the ways of nature. For the rest of his life, he devoted himself to hunting. Within a very short time, he had shot enough snowbirds to make himself a new coat, even finer than the one which had led him to challenge the sun. What'd you think of that story?
Well, I don't know how he learned that lesson. He suffered no consequences from tying the sun down.
That is true.
A giant dormouse had to gnaw away his sister's hair to free the sun, to rescue all of the Earth's creatures from this boy's vindictive action.
Yes.
Just because he laid down in the sun, his clothing shrunk. The fool. And why did he learn a lesson? And then he could have just gotten a new, better bird skin suit, whatever that is. And I found him to be a horrible person, demanding his sister do this and that, so he can go off on these adventures. He's ungrateful. And only because he's able to make a better suit does he decide he's not going to take vengeance upon the sun for just being the sun. It's not like the sun sought him out and shrunk his bird suit.
True.
Yeah. So I can have more thoughts, but they're all on the same vein.
I can tell. I feel like it's going to be one of those episodes. But yeah, I think there is some deeper meaning here, kind of where we see...
Please tell me what that deeper meaning is. What is it?
Well, first, of course, we see just kind of like an explanatory tale. Part of it is just, well, this is how the mouse became so small. But also, I think there's some symbolism here in like where humanity's role is like within nature. Particularly when you see like the sister first offered like deer sinew and then more bird skins, but he turned those down, and the only thing that would restrain the sun was the hair of a human. And so really that was the action of both of them, of humanity trying to conquer nature, but eventually that did fail, and they kind of realized it's not our place to be lords over nature, even though we can, I think is kind of the message there. The hair is symbolic of all of humanity and their ability to control nature, but it's not their place.
Okay.
Did you not have any other thoughts on that matter?
No, that's a very creative way to find something inspiring in that story. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you. You are in a mood tonight. That is fantastic. Oh, boy. Do you have any other thoughts that you would like to share that were not just very...
Thoughts on all these. Let's talk about the snake people.
All right. The next story is that of the Serpent Men. After a month on the warpath, a group of Sioux warriors were returning...
Wait a second.
Yes.
I thought these were... Wait a second. Where's the quote? I thought these were people that were happy caretakers of the earth, promoting unity and continuity. But these guys were on a warpath for a month? What is a warpath? Is that where you promote unity and you're a caretaker of all the stuff out there? Or is it where you go around to neighboring villages and murder people?
Thank you for those insights.
It was a question.
Do you want me to answer it, or I thought it was rhetorical?
No, it was not rhetorical.
Then I don't think being on a warpath is a sign of being peaceful. No.
Unifying.
No, probably not.
Caretaker, all that is good.
But yes, as I was saying, the story of the Serpent Men. And after a month on the warpath, a group of Sioux warriors were returning home when they scattered to gather food. One of the braves then laid his ear to the ground and said he could hear a herd of buffalo ahead. So the chief and his men went towards the sound, but instead of a buffalo, they came across a gigantic rattlesnake, and the chief managed to shoot an arrow into its neck, killing it instantly. Hunger soon overcame the chief's sensibilities, and he ordered his men to cook the snake into a stew, and they all ate of it except for one brave, who was very wary about the whole situation. The next morning, all the men who ate found themselves turned into half snake, half men, and so they asked the one brave who was not a snake to gather them in a large robe and carry them to the hill overlooking their village.
Wait, I thought they were all snake. I thought the chief, as he's turning into a snake, he's half snake, half man, and he's able to talk to the dude. I didn't think they're half snakes. I thought they were full snakes by the time the process was over.
You could be correct, but I just read it as... I said, then he gazed at his own body and cried out in alarm, for he himself was already half snake, half man. And I just took that to mean that was how they were permanently.
No, he's just in the transition.
Okay.
That's like them. They're trans people. before they have the surgery, they just start wearing clothes. They're half trans or something.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Snake half man, so he's a trans man, or possibly a trans snake, trying to make it modern.
I think you failed at that attempt. I don't think that's how that works.
Oh, all right.
Anyway,
Transitioning.
as I was saying, the brave who was not a snake carried all of these snakes to the top of this hill, and fearing that he might be attacked by the snakes, he flung the robe away. But instead of attacking, they shared their strange wisdom and charms with him, asking him to tell their families what had happened and that they will return in the summer. When the snake men did return, the villagers brought them their old moccasins, leggings, saddles, and weapons, and the chief assured them that they meant no harm. And I'm very, very sorry, but I'm going to read from the book again. In the winter, the snakes vanished altogether, but every summer, for as long as the villagers could remember, they returned, wearing a new and brilliant coat. The villagers always treated them with the greatest respect and taught their children to revere the serpent, so that even today, if a snake appears in the pathway of a tribal warrior, he will always stop and talk to it, offering it some token of his friendship and regard. What are your thoughts on this story? Probably not pleasant, but I'd love to hear them anyway.
What's the point?
Well, it's the story of how snakes came to be and why they shed their skins.
And so there's some dudes that went on a war party and killed a snake. I guess the lesson is, if you see a giant snake, don't eat it. Kill it, but don't eat it, because then you might become a snake yourself.
That is true. That is true.
Have you ever had snake?
I have not had snake. Have you had snake?
No, I've not.
Oh, I was going to ask if it tasted good, but you wouldn't know.
I suspect it doesn't.
Probably not. It's not a common dish.
I don't know if there's any really good restaurants that are like, hey, got a special on snake.
Well, it'd be hard to serve if all of your customers turned into snakes at the end of the meal.
True.
That is unfortunate.
But I don't think that really happens in real life. I think this is a myth.
Really? What gave you that idea? I do think it is interesting that snakes, at least in this story, are to be revered. I think we see, basically in nearly every other culture, snakes are the worst animals in mythological stories. I mean, we see that in Christianity. We see that the Greek myths too. In a lot of cultures, snakes are just thought to be terrible beings, and you should kill them immediately. So it's fascinating here that they are treated with respect.
Yeah, you'd think that these guys would not want to be around snakes. There's a number of poisonous varieties in the United States in that area.
Well, the snake they encountered was a rattlesnake, so
right.
That is an issue.
A giant rattle the size of a human head.
Yeah, that's a little freaky.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you why I get nervous when I'm at swimming in Table Rock Lake?
Yeah, I don't think you have.
Because I read a story about how big some of those fish get, and I'm nervous swimming in any body of water that has a fish larger than my head. Get very nervous in the ocean.
Yeah, that's
large lakes. They have huge catfish, and what are the other fish? They're just huge. Carp, I guess, in Table Rock Lake. They're like 50 pounds or something. It's
wow,
nuts.
That's impressive. Actually, those are some big fish.
They're swimming. You'd be like, I want one of those fish to grab my feet and pull me under.
Yeah, that would not be fun. You're right. Thank you for the brilliant commentary here.
I don't know that that's ever happened.
I doubt it. I highly doubt it.
But I have this irrational fear of these fish.
I can tell. Fish aside, I think it's time to move on to the next story, which is that of the Sacred Bundle. In a village of the Pawnee tribe, there lived a young man who showed no interest in maidens, instead going out on every hunting party and always wearing a white eagle's feather on his head that he believed to have magical powers. On one such hunt, he came across a buffalo cow, and he raised his bow to kill it, but suddenly it had turned into a beautiful woman, and the two spent many hours talking together. And the hunter was so enamored that he asked the girl to marry him. She agreed on the one condition that they live in a lodge at that exact spot. The hunter then gave her a string of blue and white beads as a wedding gift. For many months they lived together happily until one day the hunter returned home to find his lodge surrounded by hoof marks and his wife missing. And after searching for her for many weeks without luck, he returned to his tribe dejectedly. The years passed until the day came when he was approached by a young boy wearing a string of blue and white beads. This boy called him father and told him that mother would like to speak to him. The hunter told the boy to leave, but he came and left twice more until the hunter begrudgingly followed him to a buffalo cow. And the memories of his past life then flooded back to him, and he ran after the buffalo. However, the buffalo was annoyed that he had not come when summoned, and so she made the chase long and arduous, drying up every creek they crossed, and the hunter only survived because the boy had pity on him, giving him food and water until they arrived at the home of the buffalo. The leader of the herd was the mother of the cow, and he had never approved of his daughter's marriage, and so had been the one who had kidnapped her. But after lengthy deliberation, he agreed to let the hunter live if he completed a number of trials. The first task was to pick out the cow from 5 other identical cows, but his son helped him find his wife. He was then to pick out his son from 5 identical calves, and so his son flicked his tail in the air, helping him to pick the right one. Promising to give the man his wife, the buffalo leader then told the man to sit patiently. But when he sat, the whole herd stampeded towards him, stopping only when they were sure he was dead. But he remained sitting calmly with a white feather in his hair. The buffalo leader finally respected him, giving him his wife and son, but before he could be welcomed into the herd, the leader asked him to bring him some fine foods. With his wife and son, the hunter then returned to his village, finding that a great famine had struck them, and so his wife pulled from within her robe a slab of buffalo meat to feed the people, and they continued for many months until the tribe flourished again, giving them many possessions to present to the buffalo chief, and so the family went to the herd. However, the young son could not rest, knowing that the tribe was in want of food, and so he went to his grandfather the chief to find a solution, then bringing the herd to the people, saying, "From this day forward you may hunt the buffalo for food, but you must not kill my son, who is among them, for it is he who generously provides with the yellow calf. The time will come when you will be directed to kill the yellow calf and sacrifice it to the god Tirawa. Then you must tan its hide and form a bundle of its skin, placing within it an ear of corn and other things sacred to your tribe. Every year you must look among the herd for another yellow calf. This too you should sacrifice and keep a piece of its flesh to add to the bundle. Then, whenever food is scarce and famine threatens, you must gather in council around your sacred bundle, pray to Tirawa, who will answer your need and send another yellow calf to you." All this was done, and the father became a great chief among the people, and when he died, the sacred bundle was preserved, always helping the people. What did you think of this story? Again, nothing good, I'm sure, but let's hear it. Let's get it out of the way.
Well, you're really kind of negative towards me today.
Oh, you have been somewhat negative. I'm sorry if I've been negative in response, but your thoughts have not exactly been uplifting throughout this episode.
I don't believe you when you say you're sorry that you're negative in response. I guess it's, obviously the buffalo played a large role in a lot of these tribes' histories and survival. And I guess this is a story of kind of like how they came to an understanding of the buffalo are essentially sacrificing themselves for the hunt. And certain religious practices with regard to the yellow calf, they have to sacrifice that and that kind of stuff. All I can think of through the entire story was, I wonder how many young hunters hesitated before they shot an arrow into a young buffalo, hoping that it would transform into a beautiful lady.
Yeah, that can be a bit misleading, I guess.
It could be my arrow. It could be my time.
Yeah, those poor hunters not killing a single buffalo in hopes that it would be a beautiful woman.
His buddy's like, kill it. We're hungry. It's right there. I think I may turn it into a pretty girl.
I actually really like this story, and this is, as far as I can remember, one of the first examples of kind of like the quest for the woman, like the many trials to obtain a wife that we've seen from the Native American stories. I know that was like super, super common in the Greek myths, especially. Do X, X, and X, and you'll be granted this, or do that, and you'll get this beautiful woman. So I think it's fascinating that this is, I think, the only story that we've seen that has this trope, which seems to be so common in other mythologies. Definitely very, very prevalent in many cultures, because that's probably what happened a lot of the times is, if you want to take my daughter, you have to do this, this, and this for me. And then when it's applied to myths, it's just big heroic tasks, kind of like what we've seen here.
Yeah, when I was reading it, I was thinking the exact same thing, and I was thinking, I wonder what kind of wonderful things he's going to have to do. And then he cheats through the first two, identifying the wife and the son, because they just told him who was who, and then he just sat there in the ground while the herd ran around him. So I was like, okay. And then when he has to go get all the food for the for the herd or whatever.
Hmm.
He didn't even do anything. It's his wife that does it, right?
That's true.
So he doesn't even do anything, but he's the hero.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually think about that. But yeah, he kind of just didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah.
I guess he had some sort of magic powers with his white feather, but I don't know beyond that.
Oh, no. They had no magic powers. He's like, oh, so which one of these is my wife? Oh.
Well, no, he had magical powers when the buffalo tried to stampede him. The white feather, I think, was supposed to be shown as protecting him there because he was completely unscathed.
It wasn't just the fact that he just sat there and they ran around him instead of over him, I guess.
Yeah, no, they were trying to stampede him, and he was protected. There's a clear circle around him.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that buffalo and a stampede are pretty stupid. You know, I was just thinking, well, he was just calm and they just went around him. But I guess you're saying that he had some sort of special cone of buffalo safety around him. He had some sort of anti-buffalo force field or something.
Yes, I guess you could say. I also want that on a shirt. I have a cone of buffalo safety around me. If I ever go out to a national park out west in the plains, I need to get a shirt that says I have a cone of buffalo safety.
That reminds me of my favorite Nana Cherry song, Buffalo Stance.
I have never heard of that.
Google it. I have it on vinyl.
Do you really?
I do. Nana Cherry. The single. No, it was a single. It's a full album.
I've never even heard of her.
Not a bad song.
Really?
Pretty catchy.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out. I'll have to, as you say, Google Madoogle it. I'll have to check that out. Moving on to the next story, which I'm sure you will absolutely love. I'm sure the thoughts are plentiful with this one.
I will have a disclaimer right now. I'm not going to comment on this story at all. I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, I think it's a completely different thing than what you were expecting, and I think I know what the thing is behind this story. But we'll see. We'll see.
You take it. You take over this section. You got it.
All right. So this story is the origin of the three races. Deciding to make a new species, the Great Spirit tried long and hard, making a figure whose skin was as black as night, and he was satisfied, but set out to make another. His next creation had red skin, and the Great Spirit was even more pleased, and he created again for the last time, making a figure of white skin, who was the Great Spirit's favorite. Calling the three men before him, the Great Spirit asked them to choose from 3 boxes, one which held tools, one which held weapons, and one which held books, papers, and quills. The white man chose first, moving past the tools, pausing by the weapons, and finally choosing the books. The red brother then chose the weapons, and the black brother chose the tools, and so it was that the 3 races were made according to the Seminole people. So, since you say you will not comment on this one, I think I know kind of what's going on here, and it actually is a linguistic thing in terms of colors, because I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, but, certain languages, have different amounts of basic color terms. And if you have 3 color terms, they will always be black, white, and red, like without fail across all kinds of languages. If a language has 3 color terms, they will always be black, white, and red. And so I know the direction that you want to take this in and the thoughts that you are thinking, but I do not think that your thoughts are correct. I do not think this story is racist, as you said in the introduction. I think it's more just, the white symbolizes knowledge and light and kind of goodness. That's why it is the Great Spirit's favorite. Black represents sort of the toilers and the workers who are not exactly the favorites of the high god. And then red is just the in-between color, the perfect middle between black and white, because what we see in 3-color languages is that everything is basically a shade of black or white. Like you would say ocean black, which would be their word for blue, or you would say leaf white, which would be their word for green. And then you have your own unique color in the middle, which is red, opposing, the black and the white on either side. So I think it's more of just a thing of these are levels of like just working to knowledge. I don't think it is actually meant to be about the races. Do you have any thoughts on this that you would like to share?
It's fascinating to me that you talk about the 3 primary colors, the black, white, and the red, because if I recall correctly, when infants are the early stages of development, they can only distinguish between those 3 colors.
Really?
So you have a lot of infant toys are black, white, and red.
Huh.
And very thick designs because as your eyes are developing, that young. So that is pretty wild that some languages have those as the 3 primary, which you don't normally think is primary color in our color wheel or whatever. But yeah, so like when we were getting toys for you little boys when you're little tiny, and books like little board books when they're really really little, and you're reading a story. A lot of them are black, white, and red.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So I had that thought.
But I guess that makes sense in sort of the development of language. Like if you're going to classify things, I mean, it makes sense to only classify them by the three colors you know first. And there are some languages that only have two. I don't know any off the top of my head, but I know they exist, and they only have black and white, and then everything is just, like ocean black or leaf white and that sort of thing. So, but linguistic color theory is interesting. And I used to have them memorized what all the levels are. Like if you have four color terms, it's this, 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 and this. I think it's black, white, red, and bleen. Like you'd have a color for both blue and green. You don't differentiate between the two. But I don't know past that for 100% certainty.
I think that wasn't the Seminole Indians, weren't they from Florida originally?
I think so. I was actually thinking that same thought. I should have looked this up before the podcast. I can kind of Google this now, but they were either from Florida or Cuba, because I know that there was a tribe of Indians that sort of worshipped like the colonists initially, because I think of a story similar to this where they had heard that the white man would return one day. Because kind of in their sort of story, the white man, went off to go do other things, and he was never seen from again, but he would return one day. And so I think there was a tribe of Native Americans who did worship the colonists because of the color of their skin for a brief period of time.
Yeah, until the white colonists started murdering them all and taking their women and stuff.
That is true. That is unfortunate.
I want to worship this god. He seems like it. He's not very nice.
Not quite. The next story is the first appearance of man. Many years ago, the Navajos, Pueblos, and white men all lived beneath the earth's surface at Terra Naztarni on the Rio San Juan, and they all shared the same language and lived in peace. Among the Navajos, there was a dumb man who was skilled in playing the flute, and during one performance he knocked his flute against the cave ceiling, hearing a hollow sound. He called a raccoon to come dig at the cave ceiling, but he was not making any progress, so he summoned a mothworm to dig, who after several hours finally bored a small hole, revealing light above them. The mothworm found himself on top of a mountain surrounded by water, in which 4 swans, at each cardinal direction, holding arrows beneath their wings, swam in the waters. The swan from the north was the first to spot the mothworm, and so he came to it, and stabbed it with an arrow, and seeing that it drew blood, he proclaimed that the mothworm was of his race, and the 3 other swans did the same process. The 4 swans then dug a great ditch, draining the water and leaving a mass of soft mud behind, and the worm returned to the dumb man, and the raccoon was sent to verify the story, but he became stuck in the mud that was left, staining his legs and feet with the black marks that he still has today. The dumb man then called upon the winds to dry the mud. Once this task had been completed, a throng of men and animals gathered at the opening in the roof, anxious to explore the new world for themselves. The larger beasts poured from the cave in a steady stream and scattered directly to the plains. The birds and smaller animals headed straight away for the woodlands, while the people, the last to emerge, immediately separated into different groups, each with its own language. The Navajos, who were the first to appear, commenced a large painting in the sand. The Pueblos cut their hair and began building houses. The white man set off towards the point where the sun rises and was not heard from again for a great many years. A legend told by the Navajos, a tribe of Athapascan stock, who believed that the first men and women came from under the surface of the earth. I'm sorry, did I bore you with that? You were like leaning on your hand right there with your eyes closed. I'm sorry if my storytelling was not exciting enough for you.
Your storytelling is fine. What do you think of the story?
I liked this story, actually. I think it's an interesting sort of...
Liked in all these chapters of this book. Is there any of them you have not liked?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you need to find one you don't like. I may need to find one I like, but all right, go ahead. I interrupted.
But I do think it's an interesting sort of, mythological sort of creation story in that, the whole world is just like above these people and they have no knowledge of it. And that all it takes is this dude knocking his flute against the ceiling is like, hey, wait a minute, there's something up there. And then they come out and see this wide world. I think it's also interesting the swans that are here in the 4 cardinal directions, where we see a couple times like white feathers, and swans are pretty important. Sometimes it's like white eagle feathers. But I do think like birds of white color were very important to a lot of different tribes of Native Americans, it seems. I don't know why that is, but I think it's an interesting kind of recurrent theme that we're seeing here throughout these stories, the white feathers.
I thought it was unusual that the origin was from the earth rather than the sky, or the surface of the earth, as opposed to like, underworld after you die. So that was different. It reminded me of a movie whose title escapes me. It's with Sylvester Stallone and Schwarzenegger, where they're in this supermax prison, and they're trying to figure out how to escape this prison. What is it called? And it turns out they had to like dig up, or kind of like get up through these the ductwork or whatever to escape, try to find out where they were. And I forget which one was Stallone, I guess. Finally cuts through the ceiling, and it turns out they're in a massive ship on the middle of the ocean. That was a really clever prison.
I don't think I've heard of that movie, actually. I don't know what the name of that is.
It's really bad. I pretty much turned it off once he got up. That was like the best scene. Where we're in the middle of the ocean. I don't even know how it ends. I assume they escaped. I don't know.
Probably. But it is interesting that they do come up from within the earth. That's actually a common thing in several mythologies, to have people emerge from the earth. It is interesting that you point out, like, it's either from the sky, kind of, or like on top of the earth, or from below. And I think there's probably equal amounts of each between mythologies. Yeah, it's a common thing to think of humans as coming up from within the earth, at least as far as the reading that I've done. What?
That they were living underground in caves, flutes and stuff.
Well, I don't know about the flute playing part, but yeah, there's a lot of stories that say that, humans lived underground. I think I mentioned last time I was reading a book about Moroccan folktales, and there were a couple of them where people were first just living underground, and then they came up and then sort of peopled the earth afterwards.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you made that up.
I'm not making that up. What would I gain from that? Why would I make that up? What would be the point?
I don't know. Sometimes people just make stuff up.
I guess that's true, but I am not making this up. But I appreciate your confidence in me. Do you have any other thoughts on this story?
I was trying to figure out if the guy couldn't talk or if he was stupid.
So was I. I was going to say the same thing. I don't know if he was dumb in the sense of he couldn't talk or just stupid. But
and the description was that he sends these people up. It doesn't say that he talks. He's playing this flute, and he seemed pretty stupid because he doesn't realize he could just kind of crawl up there and there's the earth. He sends a worm up there. I'm thinking, well, that's not really practical. And the poor raccoon gets all muddy and stuff. But I was thinking, but there's another story where there's a dumb person who can't speak, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. But
that word used in literature, and except for somebody who doesn't have the ability to speak.
It's a good question. I don't know.
There's so many different words for somebody who's stupid.
They really are. You're right about that. We should make a list just so we have ways to insult people next time.
I had one of my favorite books when I was in college was the Giant Book of Insults.
Of course, that does not surprise me.
It had a big yellow cover with black letters that just said Giant Book of Insults.
That sounds right up your alley. That's perfect for you.
There's a lot of Henny Youngman jokes.
That's
a reference only my grandfather would know.
Yeah, I did not get that one.
Henny Youngman. Take my wife, please.
I don't have any context for that.
Like if you're way back in the 2030s or whatever, 40s maybe, as late as that, it's a take my wife. She's a beautiful woman. Blah 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 blah. Well, he did take my wife, please. It was funny at the time.
I'm sure it was.
Groundbreaking joke.
I'm sure it was. The next story. Moving on. I hate to cut you short there. The next story is that of Oseo, son of Evening Star. There once lived a chief with 10 daughters, and the youngest was named Owini, and she was spirited and independent, often running in the pouring rain or walking barefoot in winter. Owini had rejected many suitors, but one day she had set eyes on Oseo, a feeble old man who needed a stick to walk, and she accepted him as her husband, resolving to care for him as best as she could. Owini's 9 sisters mocked this marriage, but Owini always treated Oseo with respect. And soon it was time for the tribe to journey to a certain lodge for the feast in honor of Evening Star. The couple set off together, pausing as often as necessary, and at one point Oseo raised his eyes towards the sky and said, "Pity me, my father." One of the sisters overheard this, saying it would be a blessing if Oseo fell and broke his neck. Oseo then fell with a loud cry, then fighting himself turned to a proud, beautiful youth, but Owini now stood old and shriveled, leaning on Oseo's wooden staff. It was now Oseo's turn to care for his wife, and in time they reached the lodge. And despite the fine foods placed in front of him, Oseo did not eat, having fallen into a somber mood over his aged wife. Suddenly a strange and ethereal voice reached Oseo, calling him my son, and declaring that he had been condemned by the power of evil to live a mortal life. For this was the voice of Evening Star, Oseo's father, and he now ordered him to eat the food which would give him immortality, and his family would shine with radiance and ascend to the feast in the stars. The lodge then rose into the air, and Oseo with all of his relatives were covered in, and Oseo saw that all of his relatives were covered in glorious plumage, and Owini was again a beautiful young woman. They then reached Evening Star, who warned them of the power of evil, who was known as the Small Star, and Oseo and his family should avoid his beams of light, or be cursed once more. Oseo and Owini remained faithful to Evening Star, and soon they had a son who grew to master every skill his grandfather taught him. Oseo gave his son a bow, releasing birds from a cage that hung by the lodge, assuming the child would not be able to hit one, but he did, and the bird fell, becoming the boy's young aunt when it hit the ground. As soon as the woman's blood touched Evening Star, the charm that allowed Oseo and his family to remain in safety dissolved, and they all sank through the clouds, their lodge landing on a rocky island in the sea. They would never return to the skies, but Evening Star, wishing to help them preserve their immortality, reduced them to the size of fairies. From that day forward, they lived quite happily among the rocks, never failing on a summer's evening to join hands and dance upon the summit of the cliff as a mark of respect to Evening Star. Their shimmering silver lodge can always be seen on a starry night when the moon is full and its beams touch the horizon. Fishermen who climb the high cliffs at night say they have heard very clearly the merry voices of Oseo, Owini, and the other little dancers. Because of this, they have christened the land Mishine Naki Nogong, Land of Little Spirits. This one was kind of random, kind of all over the place. I'm not really sure what to make of it. It is kind of out there. He goes to this feast, and then he hears the voice of his sort of godly father, and then his entire family turns into bird people, and the lodge floats up into the sky, which is an interesting turn of events. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, you know what I did see coming? The old man marries the beautiful young gal, and she's loyal to him, and then they switch places, and by the time he gets to dinner, he's already depressed. You know, she's so loyal to him. Her 9 sisters are giving her all sorts of trouble and insulting her. She's like, I'm still loyal to him because he's a good man. He's faithful to the spirit God or whatever. And then, then whammo, bammo, he gets struck down, and now he's a young guy, and he's like, oh, there's an old lady. But he did take her to dinner. But by the time he gets to dinner, he's in a severe depression. Oh, I'm married to this old lady. And then, bam, he goes up to the heavens, and she's young again.
Yeah, that's...
Random act of bird killing. They end up coming back down, and they're little fairies up on a hill somewhere. And, I'm not sure what the point of the story is. But...
Yeah, it was a strange one. I mean, I guess it's also sort of just an explanatory tale for this one rock in the ocean. But I guess the moral that is here is, don't judge someone based on appearances, I guess. Just because they're old and ugly does not mean that they are a bad person. You should still care for them and respect them just the same. But I feel like if that's really the moral that needed to be told, it kind of could have ended there and not have the whole adventure with the lodge going up into the sky and all the people turning into birds. But it was interesting. It was a fascinating read. Not sure what to make of it, but maybe somebody out there can let us know. They can tweet at us if you have any opinions on this story, what it really means. You can tweet at us at ULMTD Opinions on Twitter. Gotta get that plug in there. Usually I do that at the end, but I think people stop watching long before then.
Well, if they're watching, they're looking at a blank screen.
That is true. I should have said listening.
Video podcast.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, not on video.
Doing other things. Like driving. I listen to podcasts when I'm driving.
Do you listen to this podcast?
I have before.
Really?
Well, when we very first started, I wanted to know if the sound quality
is
as terrible as I thought I did.
I was about to say I cannot listen to myself. I can't hear myself speak. It bothers me.
Well, that makes 2 of us. I can't listen to you either.
That was a real Three Stooges joke right there. I appreciate that one.
I think Henny Youngman came up with that.
Probably.
Take my son.
The next story is Opeche, the robin redbreast. Yadila was the only son of an old man and his wife. His father made it clear that he wanted Yadila to be chief one day, and therefore expected much of him. It was of the utmost importance that Yadila obtain a very powerful guardian spirit, and so his father gave him very specific instructions on his conduct so as to acquit himself with a manly spirit, no matter the suffering. On the chosen morning, the old man led Yadila to the sweating lodge, then plunging him into the cold river for purification, then taking him to a more isolated lodge, where Yadila lay on a mat and his face was covered, then hearing his father leave. Every morning his father returned to encourage his son, reminding him of the honor he would gain if he went without food or water for 12 days. But on the 8th day, Yadila's strength was failing. He asked for permission to break his fast and continue another time, but his father resolutely denied him, and so Yadila continued suffering. On the 11th day, he asked again, but his father denied him once more, and he laid his head back down, his breathing scarcely audible. On the 12th morning, the father was shocked to hear voices in the lodge, seeing his son painting his chest and shoulders a rich vermilion. I'm going to read again from the book. My father was set to destroy me, Yadila muttered to himself. Although I was obedient to him, he pushed me beyond my strength and would not listen to my requests. Now he will have to respect my wishes, for my guardian spirit has been kind and just and has given me the shape I desire. At last I am free. It is time for me to go. Hearing these words, the old man broke into the lodge and began pleading through his tears, Ninguis, Ninguis, my son, please do not leave me. But as he spoke, Yadila was transformed into a robin, and as he flew away, he promised to always cheer his father with his song. And so it is today that the robin still sings, Opeche, Opeche, every morning to warm the heart of the old man. This was kind of a melancholy story. A little sad in the end. The son flies away, but I guess he still promises to keep his father happy, so he's got that going for him. What do you think of this story?
I believe it was a cover story for some guy who starved his kid to death and buried him in the backwoods and said, no, that's him up in the trees. He's a robin now, you know. He didn't eat for 12 days. For crying out, he's in a sweat lodge. You know what a sweat lodge is? I've never been in one, but it's like just like it sounds. It's a lodge made to keep the heat and the humidity in there, and you sweat.
It's like a sauna.
12 days, the guy's dying. Then I think he just died.
You know, it's possible. I think really
dragged him out, buried him. It's like, no, he turns into a robin. Hear his happy songs. Spring will hear my son sing to us.
Oh my God. I think that the real moral of the story, what it's really trying to say is, you know, don't expect too much of your children or of other people. You know, you put too much pressure on them, you know, they're going to leave you.
They might die. Yeah, you might starve them to death in a sweat lodge.
Well, he wasn't in the sweating lodge the whole time. He went to the sweating lodge first, and then he went to the river, and then he went to a different lodge, which is where he stayed for 12 days. He was not sweating the whole 12 days. He was just starving.
There on the 12th, I thought he did the river sweat 12, but that could be...
No, different lodge, not sweating lodge.
But he certainly starved for 12 days.
Yes, that is true.
Yes, I don't know how long can you live without fat? I guess it depends on how fat you are when you begin or something.
I think it's what?
I know it's only a couple days without water.
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. I think is how it goes.
He didn't die.
But he also did not have water this whole time, so he definitely would have died. Yes. Unfortunate for him, I guess. Poor guy.
He'd drink some in the river when he got a chance to go in there.
Maybe. The next story is White Feather and the Six Giants. This is a pretty long story here. There lived an old man in the forest alone with his grandson Shakopee, who had never seen another human being. But as he grew stronger and went out to hunt, he came across several mounds of ashes, which his grandfather refused to explain, instead calling Shakopee a crazy. Another day, Shakopee followed another path in the forest, hearing a voice saying to him that he would soon wear the white feather. When he slept, he will dream of a pipe, a smoking snack, and the feather. When he awoke, these items would be by his side. Shakopee then followed the voice, coming to a man whose body was carved of wood from the neck downwards, who told him that if Shakopee did not believe him, he should smoke the pipe and see the smoke turn to pigeons. The man of wood then told the boy the truth about his family, that they had been perished at the hands of giants, and he must soon avenge them, then giving Shakopee an invisible vine that he was to use when racing the giants to tangle them and bring them down. The boy then did what the man of wood said, and when his grandfather saw Shakopee with the white feather on his head, he wept, for he knew it was time to give up Shakopee. Shakopee then set out, coming to the giants' tall lodge, and they mocked him, but he ignored them, challenging them all to a race. They then constructed a course to the horizon and back, where an iron war club was sat to use on the loser. The first race began, and Shakopee used the vine to take down his opponent, then killing him with the iron war club, and he repeated this process for 5 giants. Before the 6th and final race, the man of wood again came to Shakopee, warning him that the last giant was cunning and would turn into a beautiful woman, and when Shakopee saw this, he must turn into an elk and lower his head and not look upon her. This happened as the man of wood said, but when Shakopee became an elk, the woman spoke to him flatteringly, offering to be his bride, and so he regained his natural form, laying in her lap and falling asleep. As soon as Shakopee was asleep, the woman transformed back into the giant, turning the boy into a dog and claiming the white feather. The giant and the dog traveled to a neighboring village. In the village there lived 2 daughters of a chief who had heard the prophecy of the wearer of the white feather becoming a great chief, and the eldest dressed in all her fancy clothes and persuaded the giant to marry her, and the youngest, who had no finery, welcomed the dog into her lodge. The villagers soon asked for a demonstration of the courage associated with the white feather, and so the giant, thinking that simply having the feather would give him powers, boasted that he would bring enough food to supply the whole village, and so he and the boy set out into the forest. The giant called for all the animals to come to him, but they fled in terror. But the dog went into a river and grabbed a stone, which turned into a beaver. The giant did the same, but when he returned home, his beaver had turned back into a rock, but he demanded that his wife tell no one of this. The next day, the dog grabbed a tree branch that became a bear, and the giant did the same, only to have it revert back to a branch when he came home, and it carried on like this for some time, with the giant failing at everything that the dog did successfully. The younger sister became very proud of her dog, and the elder sister tried to keep up appearances about her husband, and the dog began to make signs that he be sweated in the same manner as a human. So the sister took him to a hot room filled with steam. When the steam dissipated, a handsome young warrior lay there, but he could not speak. When the chief heard this, he called a council of all the wise people of the tribe, and they puffed on a pipe, handing it to the warrior, but he indicated that it should be given to the giant first, who puffed it and only produced smoke. The warrior then smoked, producing a flock of pigeons, and his voice returned, and he told his story, so the villagers turned the giant into a dog and stoned him, now believing the warrior to be the rightful owner of the white feather. And so he set out on a hunt with the people, finding a great herd of buffalo, the villagers then hosting a great feast to celebrate White Feather's triumph over the giant. What did you think of this story? This was a long one. This was definitely the longest one in the section, but quite an escapade. What did you think of it?
I didn't understand why he didn't kill the girl who was really the giant. Why would you transform yourself into a stag or whatever? Why don't you just kill her?
Well, she was very tempting, I guess. She was too beautiful. He could not resist laying down in her lap and falling asleep, apparently.
Yeah. But you know it's a giant dude, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like he's not very, I don't know. It seems like he should have stuck to the plan.
Yeah, I feel like that would put me off. You know, I feel like I would always think, you know, even if this woman was beautiful, like, hang on, I know that this is just a man giant. This is not okay, you know?
I'm now kissing a man giant, and I think it's a woman, but it's not. It's a man.
Yeah, I mean, poor Shakopee, but I mean, I guess I'm just different. I'd do much better at this, I think.
Yes, I certainly would, because I'd kill a lot quicker. Beautiful girl, wham! Kill the giant.
Oh dear, yeah.
Well, he got the first 5 pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed to be almost too easy.
Yeah.
And then the 6th guy was he was just like, it was too easy for the giant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't understand the whole dog thing. You know, like, I don't know. I guess the gal who took in the lowly dog, I guess she was rewarded with a very handsome chief-like kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. You know, you should take in dogs or something. I don't know.
This story kind of seems to me, I think I've mentioned this in, episodes past, but this seems like one that is, a couple different stories that have just kind of meshed together over time. I mean, there's like clear, I think, different episodes here. You have the first, strictly Shakopee, and he meets with the man in the wood and he conquers the giants. And then you have this separate story involving a giant who, tempts a young man into becoming a dog, essentially. And then the young man proves that he's really a man by, besting the giant in different ways. So I think this is, 2 different stories that have just combined over time because they have, common figures in them, which is kind of a thing that happens in mythologies. You kind of overextend, the rules to different stories and kind of combine them as they progress over time through different populations.
I was actually thinking the same thought, but I didn't say it first.
Good for you. I mean, I have no way to check you on that. So, I'm sure you did think that same thought. So good job. I'm proud of you.
That was a good analysis of the melding of 2, maybe 3 stories.
You think 3? Where would the third come in, do you think?
First story is the murder of the people by the giants, and the discovery of the giants and the race. And then I think the second one is the transitioning, the guy turning into a dog and then being adopted by the 2 gals. I don't know. The third thing kind of seems like the third thing is almost doesn't seem to fit, where they smoke on a pipe. The dog goes in the sweat lodge smoking on a pipe, and then he makes birds with the smoke. It seems like that might have been a third one. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing.
Yeah, I think that's more just like somebody's attempt at pulling aspects of the first story into the second story, because that was like the thing in the first. He'd smoke the pipe and produce pigeons, and that's like, oh, I can connect this story back to this story by making him also produce pigeons. I don't know. It does seem disjointed, though. I think there are definitely 2.
I was also thinking that he's probably a wizard, because, as you know, Gandalf could like make a ship. Isn't that what he can do? Like when he was, did he make a ship out of the smoke?
He did make a ship out of the smoke. Bilbo, blew a smoke ring, and then Gandalf, made a full ship float through the air.
Yeah. Did it have cannons that fired off in that ship? I don't think that.
The cannons did not exist in Lord of the Rings.
All right, I didn't know if he had like little smoke cannons. Pow, pow.
No.
Sailed off into this.
I think that was just some dream that you had.
Okay, the ship was really good. Yeah, so this is a lot like Tolkien. That's what I was trying to say.
I mean, there are some similar aspects. Yes, yeah, I will give you that.
There are also giants, stone giants.
There are giants in the Lord, in the Hobbit. They're mentioned for like one sentence, but yes,
they're giants.
there sure are.
They're in that movie where they're like mountains and stuff.
Yeah, I think we just talked about that 2 episodes ago. Actually, we talked about the stone giants.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. All right. Well, with that fantastic commentary, we're going to move on to the last story of this section, the last story of Native American mythology, and that is the story of the Broken Promise. Upset with the cruelty and deceit of his tribe, a hunter retreated into the woods with his wife and 3 children, and they all lived happily for some time until the hunter became gravely ill and was close to death. He called his family together, saying that his wife would be with him soon, then asking his children to always cherish each other, and for his eldest son and eldest daughter to always care for their younger brother. With that promise, his spirit went on to the land of souls. After 8 months, the mother died as well, reminding the elder siblings of their promise, and during the following winter they cared for one another attentively, but the eldest brother was becoming restless. He approached his sister, explaining his longing to find other people, but his sister reminded him that neither pain nor pleasure should separate them. For several weeks the brother carried on as usual, but one day he failed to return from a hunt, and it was now his sister's responsibility to care for their brother. For 5 months the sister attended to her brother, but she was soon filled with loneliness, so she gathered food to last several months, bid her brother to never leave the house, and she set out to find her older brother. She soon found the village, finding her brother with a wife and family, and although prepared to chastise him, she soon realized that the village appealed to her, and she forgot all about returning to the forest. The poor younger brother waited patiently for his sister, but eventually the food ran out, and so he set out on his own to forage, and eventually he became so desperate for food that he would sit near wolves and wait for whatever scraps they left. The wolves became accustomed to him, always leaving him something to eat, and so he is saved from starvation during the winter. When spring came, the boy followed the wolves to the shore of a lake, and it so happened that his brother was fishing on the lake at that time. While in his canoe, he kept hearing a familiar cry, and so he followed it, coming face to face with his brother, who said, "Nesia, Nesia, shukwa gushu, nemien gunyeo, nemien gunyeo. My brother, I am almost a wolf, I am almost a wolf." As he approached his younger brother, the boy snarled, indeed having become an half-wolf, and the elder brother called out to him, but he ran away, still singing the song. Sick with remorse, the older brother cried out, my brother, but his brother only replied, I am a wolf, and he bounded into the forest and was never seen again. A really somber story to end this section on. What do you think of the story of the broken promise?
I don't know.
You don't know? I thought you would like this one. This one has a moral. He was punished. He lost his... Well, I guess he wasn't really punished.
He wasn't punished at all.
He wasn't punished.
Punished is the poor kid who got abandoned. What are you talking about? He's now a wolf. Although maybe that's better than living with those two clowns.
Yeah. Well, he realized the error of his ways. He was sick with remorse at the end. So there was some sort of morality tale there.
Yeah, no consequences.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. He was not punished for that.
I feel bad. Okay, well, I'm done fishing. I'm gonna go back home to my wife and family.
Well, this was one of I think 4 stories in this section where we had people who were purposefully either just avoiding humanity or had no idea that humanity existed outside of their own family, which I think is interesting that it's such a common trope in these stories to have people that just are out on their own and have no idea that other people exist. I guess it was more of a common thing back then.
What do you call it a trope?
What do you mean?
Isn't a trope like something that's? This is the second time you used that in this podcast. Isn't it something that's like trivial or I thought it was a disparaging comment about the literary recurrence of a literary theme being a trope because it's forced or something.
Not necessarily. It just means it's a repeated literary theme. I think that is common.
It's not a disparaging comment about repeated literary themes.
I think it can be used disparagingly, like that trope sucks and that's a stupid trope, but I don't think it is inherently.
Trope is inherently a negative term. But in any event, while you think of that, what were you saying was the trope? Oh yeah, the isolation thing.
Well, hold on. A trope is just a word or expression used in a figurative sense, or a common or overused theme or device, but just a common device, a common theme.
Overused.
Common or overused, not common and overused. It's or overused.
All right.
But yeah, what were you saying? You were saying you were going to talk about the trope that was present there.
Yeah. No, it is. Well, I guess there's a lot of mythology about going out in the wilderness, but that's more of like a spiritual redemption type of story. And they're just out in the woods by themselves to get away from society and to be safe from whatever else is out there, to be separate. So that I think you're right. I think it is different from a lot of the other mythology stories because they're just, hey, let's go out in the woods and stay away from everybody else and live on our own without any help or society.
Yeah, because at first I was thinking, it's kind of similar to, the Indian myths that we saw where people, like you said, it was like a spiritual journey to, live in sort of solitude and poorness. But this was just, we have to get away. I don't like these people, or there's danger out there. And so we just have to live on our own, which makes me think this was more of just a common everyday occurrence that happened where you would just have families break off and do their own thing. And with the amount of just like widespread individual tribes, like within an overarching people, the little that I do know about Native American communities is that, that was a thing that happened. You had just a lot of smaller populations that would every once in a while convene into one big council, I guess, at times. They would interchange with each other. Or they would, meet with each other. Sort of like the Iroquois Confederacy, I guess.
I see.
Do you have no other thoughts on that subject?
I've exhausted my comments.
You've exhausted your comments. Do you have any comments about the Native American mythology as a whole? That was our last section, our last story on Native American mythology.
I believe that they could have used an effective copy editor because their stories kind of went from meandering about this and that, and there is a lack of even simplistic morality tales. There's no consequences for bad things in some of these stories, and it was pretty neat where they have the transition from animal to human and back again and that kind of stuff is it's a different type of story. You don't see in others as much. Going to becoming an animal then going back, but not like those superheroes that can change into things, or like what do they call those? They're not chameleons, but it's like those. There's always somebody in science fiction that can change into
like a shapeshifter.
Shapeshifter, thank you. Yeah. What's that one girl from the X-Men?
I know who you're talking about. Why can't I think of her name? She's blue. Mystique. Mystique is her name.
Mystique, yeah, she can appear as if any human. I don't know. Does she do animals too? Or
I don't think she does animals.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Interesting. It has to be bipeds.
Maybe.
Anyway, so they're different for sure. What do you think?
I mean,
I thought it was interesting.
Took the words right out of my mouth. No, I was actually going to say, I think you can really tell, like, one of the overarching themes was, the being in tune with nature was the big thing. I think that goes into the shape-shifting thing. We're so in tune with nature, we could just become part of nature. We can become these animals. There's sort of a lot of that sort of nature worship, complete oneness with nature. We're no better than the animals, that sort of thing that I think we saw over and over again. And there was something that I thought you would at least appreciate, is there was an emphasis in a lot of these stories on, caring for one's family, being with one's family, having the family unit as sort of the central building block. It's not so much, I have to do this for the whole tribe or that sort of thing, but more so I need to do this for the one I love or for my children, and I need to make sure my children look out for each other and I can provide for them in some way. That sort of unitary, solid family structure, I think, was common in a lot of these stories.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you. Well, we have hit the hour mark, which we usually do not do. We're usually just shy of an hour or around 45, 30 minutes. So this has been a long one. This has been a trek to get through these Native American stories.
I get surly when there's too much material.
I can tell. You were surly before we even started talking. It was just surliness this whole episode.
It becomes work. Give me a 10-page chapter, man. I can really get into it.
Well, the next section is one that I've been looking forward to, because those are probably my favorite stories. It's the Norse mythology is what we have up next. I don't know exactly what the first section is. I can check really quick, but I'm really looking forward to the Norse mythology, because that's one of my favorite mythologies. The first one is the creation myths, so we'll be talking about Norse creation myths next time.
Yeah, well, hopefully, well, who knows? I don't know. I don't know much about the Norse myths, so I'll find out. I mean, if it's anything like that, what's his face? Hulk Hogan? No, what is it?
Hulk Hogan?
No, the guy with the hammer.
Thor?
Yeah, Thor.
What? Hulk Hogan?
It's gonna be Thor and Loki.
Yeah. I'm sure there will be some of that. But I'm sure you'll love this. The next chapter is only 6 pages, so it will not be too much work for you, I don't think.
Oh, I can handle that. I can handle it, even if it is Norse mythology.
And these do look like shorter chapters, so hopefully you won't be surly for some of my favorite myths, because I really do like these. And these are probably the ones that I'm most knowledgeable on. I've read some of the Norse myths in their original stuff, so I'm looking forward to that section. That's something for our listeners to look forward to next time.
Yes, we're all waiting with bated breath.
I can tell with how surly you are. Do you have any other closing remarks before we wind things down here?
No.
All right. This has been Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
And you can follow us on Twitter, ULMTD Opinions on Twitter. Again, that's ULMTD Opinions. That was fantastic. You were so angry this whole episode.
Well, the stories are convoluted. It's like you go from these, from this thing to that thing, and then you're a dog, and then, some lady takes you into her home, and then...
Oh, man, I have to think about these stories.
Well, it's not even that. It's just like, where am I going? Who am I rooting for? What is this nonsense? This doesn't even make sense. I read that one, I go to another one. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
That's bonus commentary.
Yeah, there we go.